Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Shōgun Season 1, Episode 5. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So there's so many moving pieces to this episode. I think this interesting overarching theme is kind of like, even more so, this episode was like the clashing of cultures in a way of like, right, it feels like John felt like he had his footing on a lot of stuff, but he didn't really know the consequences of a lot of stuff. Like, just so many things clashing led to the events of this episode. Since I am speaking on John, the fact is he got like a particular pheasant from Toranaga. And it's like, right, he wants to hang it up. He wants to, like, basically, yeah, it's going to smell a little bit, but he eventually wants to serve it as food. But everyone in the house, including Fuji's, kind of like, this is kind of weird. This is kind of wild. Everyone's just complaining about the stink. Even Fuji was like, oh, it's going to stink. But he's like, yeah, it will. But I'm going to make a signature dish. It's going to be fine and everything. I even love Fuji going around. All right, make sure he gets his own cutlery, knives and stuff like that. I don't want anyone else in this house using anything he does. Like, if he wants to eat whatever he's going to eat, let him do that. But we're not going to share utensils potentially. I just thought that was so neat. But obviously we have, I'm jumping ahead, but like, in the opening, earlier parts of the episode, we found out that Lord Toda, or Buntaro, has returned. He's alive. Kind of already knew that, just because like I saw, like, because obviously I see ads from this from time to time, and I ended up seeing one that showed a scene of him that wasn't in the context of the episode 3, so I was like, oh, he's still alive. And as the rule of thumb typically goes, you don't see a body, they're not dead type of situation, right? So I wasn't too surprised at him coming back. I almost probably halfway expected it to be later, but to be fair, we're at the halfway point of the season, so might as well. It's only been an episode or so, but granted, we don't know how much time frame has passed between episode 3 and episode 5. But his return, he's now going to be staying in the same house as Mariko, Fuji, and John. And now it's like, this is kind of a complicated thing, because as we know, Mariko and John have gotten closer, so that's going to cause some issues, especially because he doesn't think much, like, Toda doesn't think much of John, and because he looks at him, still calling him the barbarian, even though he is now Haramoto. Like, he makes a point of that. He never, like, shows him respect, because he constantly like, oh, a barbarian. Oh, next thing we're going to eat with our feet. He looks down upon him, even though it's like, it's supposed to be the thing of, like, he's got such an honorable position, but at no point does Lord Toda, like, reciprocate that respect. And John's trying to walk the tightrope that is this precarious situation. So it is interesting. Obviously, Fuji's kind of in this complicated spot, because obviously she's with she's the, she's consort to Haramoto, but it ends up being the situation of Toto's like, oh, does he take you to bed? And she's like, thankfully no, he has prefers other women. So it's like, right, she's also, which she's happy about, but I think there's a part of Fuji that actually kind of does like, I don't know, like in a likes him, but more just like, oh, he's not as bad as I thought he'd be type of way. But I don't think she could really let that on with her uncle, because the way she talked about like him, and like, oh, he doesn't he has interest in other women really, and she's smiling while she's saying this, because she's trying to walk this tightrope herself when it comes to her uncle. And she even talks later on to Mariko about, like, we're both cursed. Not only do we have to deal with that dead bird, that dead pheasant outside stinking up the place, also him returning, because it seems like it's not even just Mariko that has issues with Toda, it's also Fuji. Like, Fuji doesn't seem to like him very much either, because she's Hiromatsu's granddaughter, but I don't know if that's granddaughter in the sense of by marriage, or whether it's like, no, that's his actual blood granddaughter. Because like Toda is his son, so I'm curious, like, she says, like, obviously says uncle, but that's what I'm saying, like, is it blood related uncle of like, oh yeah, like, that's your father's brother, or is it a situation of like, no, it's just he's your uncle by marriage. The reason why I was like getting so caught up in that, because I feel like that can infer a lot about the relationship, that they're blood related, and even she doesn't like him. It becomes that thing. I mean, especially a lot of Japanese culture is about obviously respecting your elders and family being so important, and it says you have to, it ties into that larger conversation last episode, and it comes up this episode too, of the whole eightfold fence thing of just like being so far away, distance yourself from everything. But either way, the dinner situation didn't go great, because obviously Toda is like running his mouth off about John and John's truck. Like, there's a little back and forth. I was like, is this a dick measuring contest? Because he throws out like the instead of drinking sake out of like the small bowl, the bowl that had the food in, John pours it in that, and it's like, oh, him and Buntaro are like exchanging back and forth, drinking, and to the point they get drunk, and then it becomes this mess of a situation, and like Mariko is trying to like ease this situation, try to handle it as best as possible, and Fuji, like I said, her and Fuji in particular are walking this tightrope, because I think it's just a pride thing all across for Toda as well as John. It's just kind of like, all right, you want to swing your dick around, I can swing mine around too. It's like, it's, that male ego starts getting in the way, because I think because for one, John knows like there's something up between Mariko and her husband. Like, she hasn't been herself. Like, she's, as we've seen before, she makes herself smaller in front of him. She has to be kind of a different person than who she's been lately around him, especially their rendezvous last episode. So it's kind of like, oh, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? But when John asked Toda about his escape from Osaka, he kind of was like, oh, like, because there was this whole conversation he had, I thought was an interesting line, where he was basically like, heroism is only for the dead, and stories are for children. Because for him, I think there is a bit of like shame as a samurai that, oh, I survived regardless of it. That was supposed to be my place of death, and here I am alive. And it's just, I think a lot of personal resentment and shame he has on himself. He's like lashing out at everyone else, making it on them. And then he asked, John about, it's like, oh, show me that you are, like, tell me some of your war. So he's like, oh, I don't have any. And he kind of pushed Toda to do it. But then it's like, Toda, he had made this comment before that his swords and arrows will always be better than cannons or whatever. But he wants to prove a point. And so he shoots an arrow right near Mariko's face, just to show, like, even if I'm drunk, like, look at my bow and arrow. Like, he did that to be a dick to Mariko, but also to show, like Mariko couldn't move despite anything, because it's like, right, it's her job to be obedient. And that ended up being this larger conversation too, of like, he even acknowledges it, like even John saying like, oh, she is your property, but it's still your wife, so you need to treat her with even a monochrome of respect and treat her better than, I mean, you literally fire 2 arrows in front of her face just to prove a point. And Mariko won't say anything in defense, and in fact, Toda, just to shame her even more, it's like, you know what? Tell him about yourself. And now we find out the truth. What we've got these little tidbits about with Mariko, her real name. It turns out that her dad assassinated the leader of Japan before the previous Taiko took over. And this guy was a terrible person. He was a murderer. He was this and that. But the ramifications for doing that, regardless of who they were, you assassinated a head honcho here, and the ramification was her father had to have like all his wife and Mariko's like siblings all kneel down, and one by one he had to kill each and every one of them, and then had to kill himself. And Mariko's shame, and this is where her and Fuji had that conversation about, and she's brought up before, she wants justice for the situation, and her justice is she wants to be able to die. Just like Fuji was forced to live, like, your husband and your baby are dead, they have to die, but you have to live on. That's the cruelty of this situation. She ends up being the only one left. And I think that's what she was kind of talking about. She's hoping that Toranaga is the only person, well, outside of her husband, Toranaga is the only person that can give her the honor of death. because her husband, she begs her husband every year on the anniversary of her family's death, begs him for death, and he refuses, and he lets her live. So it's this terrible relationship, because it's like, he's like, I know the Lord told, like, Toranaga, or just, you were ordered to live. That's what you will do. Because it almost feels like it is like a bit of him wanting control over her to make her live with the shame, because that's what you've been ordained. Like, you were told to live with the shame. That's what you're going to do. You're not going to take the easy way out, you know? And I think that has led to him, like, resenting her. Like, I guess, because I think Mariko was maybe already married to Toda at that time, because I think they got together like roughly around that time. I think she was even saying like they were already married, so I guess it put such a stain on their family reputation because of that. So, because it seemed like out of anyone in the family, it seems like that's, I mean, I guess that's why they are like, their stories are similar, you know, like trauma and the pain of having to be the only ones that survive. That's kind of what keeps Fuji. I mean, they are family, but, you know, I think that plays even more into why Fuji and Mariko have the relationship that they have. We kind of already knew something like, but we assumed it was just about her dad. We had no idea. Like, I mean, once again, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, because we already saw it with Fuji's husband and baby. That's like, it makes sense, whatever shame, because my association with seppuku has always just been like, right, the self-disembowering, but you kill yourself. The whole getting rid of your bloodline shit, that is new to me. I've never associated that with the honor thing. I thought it was just, you, by your death, you restore honor to your family. Hearing this story obviously bothers John so much, because he knows, like, because he was even telling Mariko, it's like, you don't even have to tell me. He can't understand us. Just make up some BS. You don't even have to tell me. But, you know, it's that culture thing of, you are bound by your word. You are bound by, like, the honor of the situation you were in. She is bound to her husband. He tells me to do something, I will have to do it. That's how this society works. That's the thing for John. It's like I said, the clashing of cultures. You can disagree with something, but, like, the fact is, you are an outsider to this. Something that has been generations upon generations of cultural history. Who the fuck are you to come in and be like, oh, you're wrong? You can disagree with it because where you come from. Because I think that's a conversation that can be so relevant today. There are so many things, you know, I had, as an American, I have my worldview on certain things. That, like, oh, there's certain way things are in other countries. I don't agree with their stances on things, but it's like, for me to kind of dictate certain, like, especially when it, and even in this case, like, I don't know enough Japanese culture, just like John doesn't know enough about this culture. He thinks, like, from the perspective, it seems silly. It's easy to say that from an outside perspective, but like I said, this is the way the society's always been, and it's like, do things need to change? Did they eventually change? Yes. In his rage, Toda took it out on Mariko, because I guess it's like, he blames her even though she's doing what Toranaga told her to do. He's drunk. Like I said, that's why I'm like, a lot of her family shame, like I said, I think they might have already been married, and now it tarnishes his family name by association, because we're married. So I think that's why it seems like he does resent her. So I think a lot of that's been building and getting drunk. Not saying it's an excuse. He's going to say it was he even says, oh, it was the sake. It's like, no, that's what's been bubbling beneath the surface. You're just using the alcohol as an excuse, as it brought forth what was already there. And he beat her up. Even Fuji, like, had the gun in her hand, like, but she was trying to stop John. But just like John saw Mariko's face, and he went after Toda, and Toda was just like, right, he pulls out his sword, lays it down, he's like, I'm sorry, it was the sake, I dishonored your home, and he's just like, you are a worthless piece of shit, that's what you're gonna do? Just blame it on the sake. And it's like, John knows he's in this position, he can't really do anything. So the next day, he tracks down Mariko, but it ends up being that conversation, too, from her perspective of, once again, this is how things are, and she says that my husband doesn't even deserve my hatred. I won't even give that to him. But from John's perspective, it's like, okay, I get it. You're being silent and the eightfold fence. But it's like, what does that mean? He's like, you are so quick to want to die as revenge for your father. But here you are also at the same time keeping quiet and just suffering because of your husband's. And like, you know, it's like, which one of those are you? Because at the end of the day, you are you just like I'm me. You know, we have our individuality. We are our own people. Like, you shouldn't let someone have to dictate something else about you. But for her, it's like, this is how things are. Don't, you know, and now it's like, shouldn't even be talking like this. In fact, going forward, the only words that's going to be exchanged between us, it's because we're translating for other people. Like I'm talking for other people to you, and you're talking to me simply to talk to other people. That's how this deal was supposed to be, and we'll go back to that. Because I think she is kind of torn, because it's like, it is that complicated thing of, and that's what I was bringing up last episode about the freedom conversation, because there was some alleviation from the fact is that she thought her husband was dead, and when she saw that he was alive again, it's kind of like, yay, massive question marks behind that yay, because of what's, for the first time in so long, she felt freedom of not fully being weighed down by her family's circumstance and situation, because he's a constant reminder of that, whereas like Toranaga isn't, So, and that ended up being a conversation too about freedom, where she's just talking about like, right, when you like all you aim for is freedom, then what's the freedom you need to escape the one that's imprisoned is you, because when all you know is the freedom and all you chase is freedom, that's a prison of its own, because you're just trying, basically you're running away from just living life, and just, when you're constantly on the run and just running towards freedom, like that's a prison of its own. It's kind of a whole point. So it's like, which one of us is really in prison type of situation. But it's like she latched onto him last episode because of like how nice he was to her, and also she had felt for the first time in probably like a decade and a half, she felt the breath of freedom for the first time, and that all kind of came undone with the return of her husband. We even had that sad situation when it's all said and done with Yujiro. That was heartbreaking, because it's he came back and he's like, why is everyone so sad? The people in the village were sad. He was like, what's that about? It turns out Yujiro was killed because he was saying it as a joke. He didn't mean it literally, but he was like, right, if anyone touches this, they die. He didn't mean it literally, but because Ujiro took it down, because the smell and everyone kind of looking at it as upon a curse, Ujiro took it upon himself to be like, right, I'm already sick, so if I interact with this thing and get sick, I'm a sick person getting sick and potentially dying. That's what it is. And so they ended up, because the rules of the household were made, and it's just like, but for him it's like, wait, what is this place? Like, he's like, I'm called the barbarian, but in his mind it's like, this is barbaric. It's like, but these were your words. Your words carry weight. And because he didn't understand the weight of what his words meant, he didn't know that they were going to take it literally, like, because that's the thing of like, things are not, that's translations for you. You don't get context in translation. It's like him saying like, oh, and you touch it, you die. You didn't see like the context isn't translated, because he doesn't know probably how to say it properly enough to add the context. He probably would have been like, it's a joke or whatever, but it's like, no, your words are law, especially considering the position you're in. If you were anyone else, sure, it wouldn't matter, but you are Hatamoto, you are the head of the household in this situation, your words go, and Ojiro, regardless of the circumstances, died for that. And it's just like, it sucks. And obviously later on Mariko's like, well, he was, it's kind of like, it's the honorable way someone could go under those circumstances. He was already sick. But for him, it's like John realizing like, this was on me. I'm the one that got him killed. That's a heavy thing to kind of have to contend with. Of like, he's like, right, you can try and blame this society and stuff like that. This is the way this operates. You're the one that didn't understand the context. You're the one that doesn't understand the rules of how things work here. So this falls all on you. So that was a rough situation, and obviously kind of took it out on Fuji as well as everyone else. He was just like, go away, just go. Because she was even saying like, right, like, go ahead and like kill me, like cut off my head. I'm sorry, I failed you. But it's like, it's not Fuji's fault. It's not anyone else's. It's his for not understanding the weight of what he said. Because once again, it was just meant to be an offhand comment of, you touch it, you die. He meant it sarcastically. He didn't mean it literally. But once again, sarcasm and stuff like that, I don't know how that, how you go about translating that into a different language. It doesn't always translate. And also the fact is that even if it can be translated, he didn't go about it translating it the right way because he didn't know how to. He said it so literally that they took it as literal. Like, they probably wouldn't take it as a joke even if he said it jokingly. Like, I don't think there is a way to say that jokingly. And sadly, Mariko wasn't around to explain, like, well, at the time, she was kind of like, she wasn't around when he made that proclamation, so she didn't know to be like, oh, he didn't mean that. And once again, it's still his word. Even if Maruko corrected it, he'd have to be the one to say it, to be like, no, that's that's not what I meant. So it's just one thing after another led to that sad turn of events. The effed up thing is it works in the end because obviously Yabushige is still looking for the spy, which is home due to I forgot his name, but he was asking Toranaga, is like, I can turn myself over so that he'll stop. But Toranaga's like, no, you are an honorable samurai. I still need you to be my spy. Find someone else to take the fall. I'm like, who the hell's going to take the fall? It's like, well, Ujiro was already dead, so might as well lay it on a dead man regardless. So now Yabushige is going to stop looking for said spy. So interesting turn of events there. So that's kind of where things currently stand on that side of things. I've kind of like, pulled in certain other elements of the story, but picking up where the last episode left off, obviously, Nakakado doesn't feel, the fact is his demeanor when his father returned and everything, he didn't see anything wrong with what he did. He thought he did the right thing. But Toranaga showed up obviously with Toda as well as the rest of the army. And it's like, oh, he came back to, I guess that's what he did. He went back to Edo, gathered his forces, I guess, and ended up picking up, because I think they even said it that Toda had made his way to Edo, I think. He had some wandering Ronin with him. It was like, I think what they said 30, but by the time it was all said and done, by the time they actually made it to Edo, there was only like 2 alive. I don't know if that was like 2 man and Toda or 1 Ronin and Toda equaling 2. I don't know. Either way, Toranaga not too happy with his son, kind of calling him an idiot, saying like, you don't even realize you played right into Yabushige's hands. In fact, more likely you played into Omi's hand, which I'm like, yo, Toranaga's got this shit figured out. Because like, that's the thing, like calling out Yabushige, no big deal. Like he sees Yabushige for the weasel that he is. But for him to throw out Omi, is like, he must know enough about Omi. To be fair, he does have a spy there, so he probably heard like, oh, this trickled and came back from Omi. So like Home Dude must have told Toranaga, he's his eyes and ears here, so he must have told him about not only Yabushige but also Omi. So I love that Toranaga confronts him about like, oh, the Ishido thing. And it's like, no. Even if he he's telling me to go back, but I won't, my lord. I'm gonna stay here by your side. This is where I belong. It's like, or are you playing me? He's like, are you just waiting for the opportunity to kind of screw me over? He's like, are you the one that talked to my son about doing that? It's like, no, that was Nagakado's thing. It's like, no, my son isn't smart enough to have or clever enough to come up with that, so it had to be you. But it's like, if it wasn't you, he's like, okay, it was Omi. They were talking. I'll punish him. And he was like, why would you punish such a smart young man? In fact, you know what I'm gonna do? That regimen, cannon regimen I just took for my son, I'm going to give it to Omi to run. Now, there's all kinds of fuckery of what Toranaga did. For one, the shame of stealing it from his son, because his son's like, right, I did what I thought you wanted me to do. It's like, yeah, but you brought war to our doorstep, once again, not even realizing you're getting played. He was kind of trying to teach him the whole lesson of being able to kind of recognize situations like that. And this was it's meant to be a lesson. Because it seems like a lot of his lessons don't like come across to his son. It's kind of the whole point he's making. But it's also a sting to Yabushige because this is supposed to be his. He's the one supposed to be kind of running the region and stuff like that. And the regiment is supposed to be his, but yada, yada, yada. So it's all blowing up in his face. And then you add on top of that, it was his nephews kind of sneaking it from him. And Omi even said like, oh, if you want me to, uncle, like I can hand it over to you. He's like, relinquish it. Why would you relinquish something that's already mine? Like the fact that he's like, you must got this twisted. Like he got really uppity in Omi's face. Cause Omi's trying to hold back, being like, oh my god, it all worked out. Oh, I gotta play like, oh yeah, I can give this over to you if you want to, uncle. But it's like, no, even if you're in control, this is still mine. And he's even saying like, yeah, let's talk to Shido, send him a message. Let's try and kind of clear this up. Once again, it's like, oh, I love that boy Yabushige, because like he just can't help himself. He's such a two-timer because he believes, like, right, this isn't going to go the way of Toranaga. It's like Ishido's going to win in the end. Which, speaking of, they're trying to decide what they're going to do about Toranaga, Ishido, and his people. And it ends up being the situation of, once again, they can't vote on anything. They have to find a new regent to replace him before they can vote on anything. Because Ishido and the others were put in a very compromised position. And it ends up being this conversation of, well, who's going to be the replacement? Oh, it should be this person. No, it shouldn't be that person. What about this person? Well, oh, you're saying this person's going to smell like a smelly country person. Well, your person's going to smell like a Christian, you know? So it's this back and forth because everyone's trying to put someone they're cool with in that position, because that means any future arguments, hey, I've got this person on my side so I could sway the votes more my way. At least already from the beginning had the deck stacked in my favor. There's even that one person, oh, I want to include Maeda, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be in the same room as that, like, rotten syphilis person or whatever. And it's like, you idiot, Sugiyama, you do realize that is Ono's cousin, right? It's like, ooh. What I thought was kind of interesting, they don't comment on it, but it just happens throughout those scenes in Osaka where one by one the other council members bow out. At first, it's Kiyama that doesn't show up, and then it's Ono, and then next we see is like Sugiyama, but he's coughing and sick, and he bows out. And there's this look on Ishido's face. I'm like, are you purposely making them sick? Like, are you trying to get rid of all of them and consolidating the power yourself? Or, like, are you trying to remove them from the board just like Toranaga so that you can be the only one in play and fill those places and positions with people that will side with you? They didn't really go into it, but like I said, just the interesting thing of like, oh, one didn't show up this meeting. Oh, the second one didn't show up this meeting. Oh, and now the third one's going as well, and the only regent present is Ishido. I'm like, what is up with that? Also, he got sent Josen's head, so that was obviously that set him off. But because there was that box that was kind of like flowing with an incense, that I'm like, is that poison or something? But I'm like, no, Ishido's right there, so he'd be in the same boat. I don't know what that is. Like, we never cut back to them after they started leaving the room. Like every meeting, one of the less of them showing up. We never got an explanation for that, so I'm like, I don't know what to take away from that. And then finally we have Ochiba returning to Osaka, and she's like, oh, I know you're the one that kind of convinced Toranaga to help get me to return. But also, she's like, I do think it's so interesting that Toranaga has managed to outfox you each and every time. And I'm like, where is she going with all of this? He's like, yeah, but I would never let anyone harm the heir or whatever. Because she's like, oh, my son might be in a terrible position. And Ochiba shows her true colors. Because isn't she the one, and do correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Toranaga said, like in the first episode, that him and Ochiba were supposed to be together, but she ended up marrying the Taiko instead, if I remember correctly. I think they had that, I think him and the Taiko had that conversation in, was that episode 2? They had that? In that episode that was like a year ago when the Taiko died. Or was kind of in the process of dying. So now I'm wondering, like, has Ochiba been orchestrating all of this? Or what? Like, I guess maybe that's why she married the Taiko. Because it puts her in that very interesting position where it's like, yes, her son is the heir. So it's like, once her son rises to prominence, I'll be mother dearest whispering in his ears on what to do. So I'll, in turn, her son would be the figurehead, but she'd be the one really pulling the strings behind everything in Japan. And I think that's kind of what she's going for now, because she's trying to... basically telling Ishido, like, no, you don't run shit, I do. So I don't know if this was always her plan, like she's had these machinations for a while. They did show, because I think they recapped it a little bit, but in that scene where when Taiko was dying, we do see this moment where, like, when she's leaving the room, Ochiba is like looking back at the room. So I'm like, I guess Toranaga doing all that he's done has kind of usurped her, like, grab for power, potentially. I don't know, maybe I'm it definitely seemed like she revealed, like, her real true intentions in that moment at the end of the episode, being like, yeah, it seems like I'm being set up as potentially the big bad of the show, but I don't know. But it's definitely a thing of, yeah, like, once again, her son is the next in line, but the thing is he hasn't come of age yet. The whole point was to have the regents kind of fill that void, but like I said, we saw them dropping one by one. Once again, they might not be dead. They might just be like, hey, we're like sick or whatever, and that might have been on purpose. I mean, that might not even been Ishido's decision. That might have been a Ochiba, like, once again, that could be she could be playing the long game. Like, maybe Toranaga and her are very similar in that regard, but so yeah, there's that angle to it. And then finally we have the end of the episode where a landslide happens. This is after like John was talking with Mariko and Toranaga, because at this point John was like, all right, can I have my men and my ship back? I want permission to leave Japan and to never return. It's all become too much. But when it's all said and done, obviously Toranaga was saying like, oh, I don't have any time for this childish shit. And in that moment, like, the land starts, I don't think it was like an earthquake. Well, I mean, I'd assume like a landslide comes about because of an earthquake. But yeah, the land shifted. Toranaga got buried a little bit. Luckily, John led the charge, but he was followed by Nagakado to unearth Toranaga, and they saved him. And he ended up giving John ended up giving Toranaga his swords because he had lost his. Which, really quickly, we found out something about Fuji too, where it's like, because Mariko had made this whole point of there's just certain things we just don't say, we just keep our mouths shut, because it turns out Fuji believes her dad died honorably, and like there's honor behind his swords. It's like, no, her dad died a coward and begging for his life, but to save Fuji's feelings and her honor, we lied to her. There's just certain things we just don't say. So it's like, I wonder, does Toranaga know the history behind the swords? You'd assume he does. So maybe that's why he thinks it's ironic, like, oh, like the Ajin ends up being the one that has to give me his swords, which the history behind those swords, there is no honor in that history. So maybe that's why he thinks it's funny. But they just look upon like the landslide getting worse and worse, and I think it's just how it's affecting their territory. I mean, I don't know if that's supposed to represent like more of his army being swept away, but it could just be like, I mean, I think it's supposed to be the point of it is showcasing his feat. His land is being taken from him in that moment. So it's kind of like, cool. What do you do in the aftermath? And I mean, this also plays into the notion and conversations we had last episode about, yeah, the earth, sea, sky, it could all come screwing you over. So they accept life and death is just kind of a natural thing. It could come at any moment. So hell of a way to end the episode on both sides of things, with everything Ochiba's doing as well as the circumstance Toranaga and his army finds themselves in. So I'm very, very excited to see where the next episode takes us. Like I said, we are at the halfway point for the show, so I'm curious to see where all this takes us, what happens next, especially in the aftermath of all of this. Like, Buntaro Toda like doesn't seem like the type, like the look he gave John as John was walking away, was like, yeah, there's going to be some beef and issues going forward. So how that all plays out is definitely going to be interesting. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.